Hey everyone, this is Brian at F Studios, my home studio away from home, and this video is about mastering a full album on the AW4416. Now, the album in question that I'm going to be talking about is my recent album, Delve Deep Inside the Mind of a Madman. Now, I'm going to be approaching this master in a manner that would be conducive to how producers and artists and mastering engineers used to approach mastering an entire album back in the day, where they're concerned about the timing between each song. They're concerned about the dynamics that interplay between each song, whether some songs have to be softer than others. And because this album is not just going to be something where each song is just pegged out to the maximum specified peak setting, there's going to be movements which are louder and quieter to create the emotional conveyance, I guess, that the artist, like in my case, that would be me, wants to give to the listener. They want you to actually use this album to sit back and be taken on a journey, so to speak. But when it comes to mastering, today's mastering process is a hell of a lot simpler than what it used to be. We're no longer worried about working within the limitations of the source material, and that's going to be used to mass produce whatever the listener is going to be using to listen to the music on. Maybe I'm sounding a bit confusing here, but what I'm talking about is like back in the day when vinyl records were the mainstream form of consumer music. They did not reproduce audio as well as the actual tapes that were used to record and mix the bands or the artists. And so a mastering engineer had to figure out, or had to be knowledgeable in how to properly calibrate his playback machine, how to properly calibrate the cutting lathe for the records, and how to be able to properly process the audio so that whatever went on the record would still sound as close as possible to the original source material and not be noticeably degraded. Because, records don't produce high frequencies very well. You can't reproduce low frequencies very strongly on, say, like left and right data, because you could cause the needle to skate. If you have too much low end in the middle, you can cause it to skip, and a whole slew of other things like phasing and whatnot. Issues you didn't have when dealing directly with tape, and issues you don't really have when dealing with digital. Outside of, phasing issues, screwing up how certain instruments would sound when all those things ended up being combined within the stereo bus. Anyway, I don't really want to get in a whole bunch of detail about what mastering is, because there's a lot more information out there than what I can give you in this time frame, and there's a lot more credible sources with more detail and more knowledge than what I can give to you. All I want to say is it's not the mystery that people make it out to be. It's not as difficult as what people make it out to be, and you don't need to have access to a bunch of different tools to make a great master. In today's day, with the DAW world, we have access to lots of different plugins that people can just overutilize when it comes to making a master, well, let alone just mixing a song. And you don't need everything like that. I argue that only use what's necessary to get the job done. Don't overdo it. So today's day of age, when you are sending your music out to a mastering engineer, what you're really doing is you're sending out your music to a second set of ears to listen to it, to figure out if they think it needs to have a little bit of adjustments made, and to possibly give it some extra color that doesn't necessarily exist from the tools that you used. And that's really basically it. Outside of that, the little creative aspects of that within the mastering process that an engineer could do, the ultimate goal then would be to get the volume levels up to where they're within the range of other music that fits within your genre that's already out there, as well as the overall tonal balance of your song so that it kind of matches and fits within the rest of the music that's out there in your genre. Okay? So that's really all it is. You don't have to have a bunch of different gear, a bunch of different kit in order to make this thing work well. If you got a great sounding mix, it's real easy to make a great sounding master. Now, I do want to say the mastering process is not where you actually make your music sound good. It is not where you actually make your music sound professional. And it is not where you make your music sound loud. Yes, you can turn the volume up at the mastering stage, which is generally what they do, because when the mixing engineers are doing their thing, they leave headroom on the master bus, on the mix, so that the mastering engineer has room to play with that stuff. But the perceived loudness and all that other stuff comes from the mixing stage, not the mastering stage. You can have two songs set up side by side, and they can both measure the same overall volume in decibels, RMS, LUFS, but one, when you're listening to it, is going to sound louder than the other. That all comes from the mixing stage, and that's all a whole complete other discussion that you, if you're interested, you should look up online from credible sources. And when I say credible sources, I mean people who actually are working for major label artists, or they're developing, the software as well to do this stuff in a DAW and make it work right. So like the guys that are working with Ozone, what is it, Ozone 11, I think they got on there. Maybe it's a different version now, but they have a YouTube site called Are You Listening, a YouTube series. And they talk about what mastering really is. They go through the process of showing you and blah, blah, blah. And of course, it's all related to what you would do in their Ozone suite for mastering. But there's a lot of guys out there who really know more significant in the music scene than, say, I am. And they talk a lot of bullshit. So they sound legit, but they talk a lot of bullshit. And you got to be able to discern what's fiction from reality. And like I said, better to go right to the source of the people who are actually doing this for those people who are multi-million-dollar platforms and artists and whatnot, not fly-by-night people that just got a YouTube channel. Okay? I know I might be shooting myself in the foot here with that, but it's really true. I found that out over the course of trying to figure out and learn how to mix, that I found out a lot of people who are always talking about how to mix something to get it to sound louder and this and that, they were full of shit. They're talking about, don't make your mixes really loud because the streaming channels will just turn it all down and you'll be quieter than everybody else. And it's bullshit. There's some truth to it, so it's like a pseudoscience kind of explanation, but the overall explanation turns out to actually be bullshit. It really just depends on how you have the different parts of the song, the vocals, the pads, the drums, guitars if you're using them, how you all have the level set and how their different frequency bandwidths interplay with one another. Like we've talked about before, we hear mid-range far easier than we hear low frequencies or high frequencies. So it doesn't require as much volume to get the mid-range frequencies to really stand out to us as opposed to what it would to get the bass frequencies to stand out or the high frequencies to stand out. And when you're pushing those bass and high frequencies up higher so they sound more balanced and more in tune with what the mid-range frequencies would be, then you are eating up way more headroom on your stereo or master bus than you would be otherwise if you were just focusing more on having the mid-range stand out while you kind of pull those other pieces back. So that's where your real loudness actually comes from. I have a black metal album that I produced live on the floor here for some guys, just some, I don't know, kids, young adults. And it is extremely loud when you go and measure it under the LUFS settings. Some of them go into the +1, +2 range. Overall, the average for the entire album is like a negative 1.2 or something like that. So it's very loud, but it's not massively distorted. And then I have tracks that are on this album that if you measure them by themselves, they're as hot as negative 4 LUFS, and other tracks that are only negative 14 something LUFS. That's because, of course, on this album, like I talked about, I want that dynamic interplay. Now, listening to it, you don't really notice there's that big of a difference between the volume, but when you're playing it back and you measure it out, that's where everything comes in. And it's because of how everything's done. On the negative 14 LUFS songs, there's not a whole lot going on in those songs. So there's lots of space for everything to breathe. And that space where there's the lack of energy from the music, that's what makes it measure out as being quieter. But the vocals are still up there pretty loud. The guitars and the bass are still up there. They sound nice and full. The drums sound nice, full, and fat and heavy. But it just measures out being quieter because the energy that is in the later songs that have a measurement of negative 4 LUFS just isn't there. And we may get into that later on as I showcase what's going on here a bit. But for now, I just want to try to help you figure out what you're supposed to do to set the AW4416 up to work as a mastering system. I'm going to argue this regardless of anybody else's opinion. There's only a handful of tools that you need to make a good master or a great master. You need good dynamics, and that's going to be compression and limiting. I mean, you could look into expansion at some point on a case-to-case basis, or companders, so you have both compression and expansion happening at the same time. And then if you want to get more to the creative realm of things, you could look into gating and ducking, which they really don't have a lot of use when it comes to mastering, but from a creative standpoint, you can do whatever you want. Now, the AW has all of that in here, and it's actually pretty good. Regardless of things that I've read from other people in the past, I've found out over the years that really what it is they just don't understand. They say the compressors in the AW and the other dynamics processors aren't very good, but what they really ended up complaining about when I got into the meat of things is they don't color the sound. The AW's dynamics are clean, they're clear, they're sterile, whatever label you want to put on it. They don't color the sound. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. The compressor is just compressing the sound. It's not colorizing it, making a tonal shift in in the sound quality. If you want a different tonal characteristic, use the EQ. The EQ in this AW can be ganged up so that all four bands will give you up to 72 decibels of gain or cut or boost on any bandwidth that you want. And that's stupidly ridiculous to have to use something like that, but it's there if you really want to use it. Now, moving on, another tool you need is going to be a good EQ, whether you have to use two of them or you can do it all in one. What I'm talking about here is you want something that's going to give you control over wide bandwidth, and you're going to want to have control over very narrow bandwidth, and you're going to want to have a gain or a reduction that only changes on a fraction of a dB scale. Now, the AW's EQ is pretty good for that. It can give you really wide bands, and it can give you a very narrow bands to where you're affecting virtually just one frequency band, one frequency. Like say you want to look right at 440 hertz, you can pinpoint 440 hertz with just a little bit of bleed out over the surrounding frequency range. And it'll let you cut and boost the frequencies at, I think if I remember right, I'll look here really quick, just a half a dB at a time. Yeah, it's just a half a dB. So that's pretty good. There's some hardware EQ systems that go even smaller than that, like 0.2 of a dB for each adjustment. But we don't need to do that right now. Not for this setup. Another set of tools that the AW can be made to have, even though it doesn't already have them built in, and I think that they're very useful to have when it comes to mastering, is going to be a multiband compressor and stereo mid-side processors. Now, I read that multiband compression isn't really used much these days anymore, and that might be true. I noticed when I was looking for hardware processors, there wasn't a lot out there to choose from, and they were quite expensive. And I know you can get plugins for DAWs to do the job, but when it comes to working with just 2-track mixes, master mixes that you're trying to master for a final product, multiband compressors can come in very handy to help control the different frequency bands within there that you wouldn't get necessarily out of just an EQ. And the AW may not have it already pre-built in, but it can be built into the mixing console. The same with the stereo mid-side processor. The mid-side processor is kind of important because now it gives you control for anything that's happening in the left channel compared to what's happening in the right channel and compared to what's being sent as a mono signal right down the center. So it lets you have separate controls over these 3 different spaces of audio. And that's quite helpful because there might be something that's in the mix that just doesn't sound right, and you don't want to have to attack it in a manner that's going to affect everything else around it. Like if you got to reduce frequency ranges, you only want to reduce it on the side where it's important, and you don't want it affecting everything else. And I'll get into that more later because there is a specific thing that I have that I've done that requires that I had to make those kind of changes. So the AW may not have those things built in, but we can build it. And it's because the AW has good EQ settings, and it has good dynamics processing, and it has a 44-channel mixing console with very flexible external and internal routing. So at this point, let's go ahead and switch over, and I'll show you how to set the AW up so it can be used as a mastering machine, essentially. Okay, so here I've already got my songs loaded in. These top tracks here on channels 1 and 2, these are my audio dialogue tracks, the story tracks, things like that, where there's characters, narration, sound effects, all that kind of stuff. And then on channels 3 and 4, this is my actual music here. So this is where I'm going to show you how to set everything up with the song right here. So first, we are on our monitor channel, and we have, if we go up here, we have channels 3 and 4 linked together in a stereo bus, okay? Or stereo channel setup. So this is our starting point. Now, what you can see here, I have auxiliaries 5 and 6 turned up to 0. And I got the auxiliaries signal flow set up to accept, they come in for pre-fader instead of post. And I got them turned off at the moment. Now here's why. It's because this is the start of the routing setup. So to get the routing to work, here's what we want to do. We first go to the pan menu, and then we go all the way over to pair bus. And as you can see, my battery's dead. It's been dead for over a week now, or not a week, but over a year, and I've been working with it with no issues. It just affects the clock. Every time I turn the AW on, I got to reset the clock if I want it to save at the right time and date. So F5, this is where we pair our auxiliary sets. We want to pair 5 and 6. We want to pair 3 and 4, and we want to pair 1 and 2. Okay, then we go up to the setup menu right here, and we go over to the patch out tab, F2. We're going to tell it that we want the digital stereo out to output auxiliaries 5 and 6. So I have a cable back here. Here's the cable, and it runs from digital out to the digital stereo input. So if we come back into the input settings now, we can see input channels 1 through 8 are set up as digital stereo, or digital in left and digital in right, respectively, odd and even pairs. Okay. So this is going to be what routes the signal to our multi-band compressor. And we're going to switch over to home channels, input 1 through 16. And here we go. Everything's set up to be a multi-band compression. And let's turn up these channels just a little bit more, just so you guys have a look, see what's going on. There we go. Now everything's in unison, in unity. So what we would do in this case, we have it set up this way. We're going to save this. We're going to go into each channel. Okay, these are stereo ons right now. Okay, that's good. Yep, good. That's going to be saved up as scene 2. And then our monitor setting here, it's going to be set up as scene 1. Now, when it goes to scene 2, the stereo bus on the monitor outputs will be turned off. And you can see, well, here we go, turned off. And then the scene 2 will also turn the auxiliaries on here, okay? So here's the deal. This is going to be the longest part to figure out how you want it set up, because we have to set the crossovers up for the multi-band compressor. And when I started it, I just chose some arbitrary numbers. I set up a 4-band multi-band compressor just because the AW's got a 4-band EQ, no other reason. And as you can see from how I got low pass filtering set up, and then other bands I have high pass and low pass, I just set it up in an arbitrary number. So it's basically 20 hertz to 157 hertz, 157 hertz to 1 kilohertz, and 1 kilohertz to 500 or 5.04 kilohertz, and 5.04 kilohertz open to 20 kilohertz. That's the start. That's where I'm starting at here. There's no magic, no mystery here, okay? But this is not going to sound right, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. So here's the song just as the mix goes.
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. A ganglion of neurons and fatty tissues is all he be. Possible oxygen starvation caused this now monstrosity. Possibly. What else could it be?
Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back and forth to show you guys what the sound is like with the way you saw the multi-band compressor already set up, right? So this is with the multi-band compressor. It doesn't really sound right. That's because the crossovers just aren't working out right.
A generous blast of paranoia is all
That's the original mix.
to do his deed. That despicable deed.
And that's the way the crossovers are set up. Just listen again.
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. A ganglion of neurons.
So you have to go through and you got to change the crossovers to make it work out right. And I'll play it while I'm letting the song play, and I'm adjusting the crossovers just to let you hear how things are being affected, okay?
And fatty tissues is all he be. Possible oxygen starvation caused this now monstrosity. Possibly. What else could it be? Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazed psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
Now we're going to go ahead and check that with the original mix.
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing.
All right, now you're able to see that I still didn't get it quite right. So, instead of continuing the video where I'm jumping back and forth here, I'll just show you the numbers that I did settle on to make it work. So the low frequency, we went from 20 hertz to 350 hertz, or 315 hertz, I should say. And then the low mid is 177 hertz to 1.26 kilohertz. And then the upper mid is 794 hertz to 5.04 kilohertz, with the highs being 2.67 kilohertz all the way to 20K. And I'll play it and let you guys hear the difference jumping back and forth, starting with the original mix.
Inside the mind
Original mix.
of a madman, there is nothing much to see.
Now this is the multi-band.
Billion of neurons and fatty tissues is all.
Back to the original mix
Possible oxygen starvation
and the multi-band.
now monstrosity.
Now you don't really hear any real difference there, and that is the point. We don't want to start off with something that's already pre-coloring the sound. We want to start off with a multi-band compression setting that's going to actually sound identical to the original mix. It's not going to do anything until we start actually utilizing the multi-band compressor. Okay? All right. Now, to go from there, the next stage is to build your mid-side processor. So everything in the multi-band, if we go to channel view, here's the low frequency. You can see everything's turned down, right? All the different bands. Let's go back to the low frequency. But the mid-side processor, bam. We now have channels 1 and 2 engaged in a stereo mode. Well, I should say the auxiliary outputs 1 and 2 engaged in the stereo mode, right? And they are set up back here. See if I can focus in. There we go. Got some focus. It is the red and white, I believe, if I remember right. Let me get around to the back side. The vocal audio will get worse, but so what? We'll do this anyway. Okay, so we're going out auxiliaries 1 and 2. So it's going to be the white and the red here. And they're coming back to my inputs on my optional in-out slots, 24-bit AD card, on inputs 1 and 2, which are corresponding to channels 9 and 10. But if you don't have these cards here, it doesn't matter. You can utilize any of the stock inputs, such as the insert in-out inputs, or even any of these regular inputs here. All right, so they come back to our 9 and 10. We go up to setup on the inputs, and here you go. Here you got them right here. You got stereo left 1 and 2. This is slot 1, input 1 and 2. Okay, 9 and 10. But I'm making a mid-side processor, a stereo mid-side processor, so that signal coming in on the inputs 9 and 10, or is being spread out through channels, input channels 9 through 14. So I got 3 stereo channels, right? So you set them up that way. And then we're still in our mode here for channels 1 through 16. And these are all stereo linked. All of them right here. Now if you select 9 and 10 here, and you go to the channel view, here's what you got. It's pan hard left. This is our left channel. And you see that the input 10, channel 10, has got the phase reversed on it. Now if you go to input channels 11 and 12, this is our right channel. And input channel 11 has the phase reversed. And if you go to channels 13 and 14, this is our center, mono channels. And there's no phase reversal on either one of those. Now, why are they reversed, or is the phase reversed like this is? Because when these 3 channels are recombined in a stereo bus, they form a stereo image again. But if you were to take the reversed signal on channel 10 and 11 and instead set them up that way on channels 9 and 12, you flip your stereo image. So what was once left is now right. I don't care to do that, so this is how it's set up. Now let's go ahead and play the song, and I will show you how things are working out here.
Possibly. What else could it be?
Now I have my stuff already set up in unison, so you could hear this.
And there is nothing much to see.
Right?
Maybe this craze
Everything's linked up via the EQ setting under fader grouping. Well, we don't want fader grouping now, right? I want to do individuals, so
to do is D.
we are going to turn off
That despicable
B,
D.
and now we can adjust these as we so desire, right? So basically, here's how it works. I'm going to get rid of what's coming through just the center, the mono frequencies. Come on, check it out. So what you end up hearing there is phased left and right mono signals. Everything, it's just mono, but it's phased. Well, that's the nature of the beast and how a mid-side processor works, right? Now let's go ahead and reset that. We're going to turn this back off. What are my level settings at anyway? Okay, negative 5.2. Good reference here. Okay, so let's go ahead and repeat this, and I'll show you the change in left and right, just so you know.
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. A ganglion of neurons and fatty tissues is all he be. Oxygen starvation caused this. Possibly. What else could it be? Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing more.
So this gives us our control over what's going on the left channel, the right channel, and everything coming out center. That's all this does. We can run dynamics and full EQ on every individual thing, left, center, or right, okay? But it's a good tool to use. Now, from here, I'm doing something that you guys don't necessarily have to do. I'm actually sending out these channels. They're all getting sent out auxiliaries 3 and 4, which you can see right there. And they're being routed to my Aphex exciter. Why? Because this is something that I'm using that adds a little bit of extra color. You don't need it, You don't need any of that stuff, but I have one. I want to use it, so why the hell not? I'll just use it. So yeah, the left channel is being sent out, the right channel is being sent out, and the middle channel is all being sent out to the Aphex. And the Aphex is being routed back into channels 15 and 16. You might be able to see right there on slot inputs 1's, input 3 and 4. Okay? So what we have here then is going to be these guys right here. Right? And from there, that's being routed into the master stereo bus and whatever processing it has. Now, I'll get into what we can do with all this stuff, okay? All right, so what does this allow me to do? This actually gives me a hell of a lot of control over shaping the sound and controlling any kind of unwanted peaks, artifacts, whatever of the sound within just what the AW4416 has to offer. And, I'll try to explain it here. We look under the mixer channel here for the original mix. What can I do there? I have full global EQ control over the whole thing, as well as level control and dynamics processing control. So if there's any adjustments I want to make each track, the one that follows the previous one, fit tonal wise, I can do that. If I need to add some compression to make something work more tonally in line with a previous track or a following track, I can do that. And I can set these things up so they all actually output towards my multiband compressor at the same level. So I don't have to continuously make huge random different adjustments with the multiband compressor to make it work. It just makes things more simpler. So then you switch over to the multiband. I have 4 controls here. I have controls for the low frequencies, I have controls for low mid, and the high frequencies. And within these controls, I also have 2-band peaking EQ available on each one. I have fader control over each one. I have gain control via compression or any dynamics processing over each one. And I can also set things up so that the processors are working in tandem based off of side chaining. They don't have to work strictly off the signal that they're being fed. They could be side chained to work from other signals. And they don't all have to be compressors. You can set some of them up to be expanders. You could set some of them up to be companders. You could set some of them up to be ducking processors. So you can get certain frequencies to duck out of the way when a bigger transient, say on the low end, comes through and you really want to have that stand out. And it's all automated. You can set it up so that the auto mix function works and controls it all. Now, going from there, you come back out into the mid-side processor. I now have full global EQ control over just everything on the left channel, with the same thing on the right channel, and the same thing on the center channel. And I have full dynamics processing control with everything on the left, center, and right as well. And this will let you focus in on things that may be troublesome, like what I was talking about earlier. I know that in my mix, my low floor tom, which is on my right channel, far right, is screwed up. When I was mixing on my Koss UR40 headphones, and I had a really nice balance of those toms with a full frequency range. And then after I got the whole album mixed on that, I decided, I want to buy some actual real specified monitors, not just headphones or whatever. So I went with the Yamaha HS8 monitors with sub. And I hooked it all up, and I'm listening to it, and it was like, it sounds like things need to be tweaked. So I went through and I retweaked the entire album on that, kind of remixed all everything, including the drums. And one thing I did is I was not getting the big punch on my low floor tom that I wanted to hear, so I boosted the bass up even higher. I didn't think about it. By the time I got out here to where I was going to master it, I'm running stereo speaker systems that both speaker systems have 15-inch subs each side. So I got dual subs. And all of a sudden now my low floor tom is just got way too much bass. Way too much. And it dawned on me, it's like, oh crap. Well, the way the HS8s work with the sub, you run your mix into the sub. Left and right go to the sub, and then it splits out to your left and right monitors. Okay, so when you have something that's just panned one side or the other, your sub is only getting half the signal then. So I was compensating for only having half the signal because I still had everything split in stereo. So from the mid-side processor, then I run into my Aphex for the extra color. Now with the Aphex, what I do is when the song's being played for the first time, I make the adjustments to where I like the sound of what I'm hearing coming back out from the Aphex. And then every song forth is mixed into that setting because the Aphex is an analog system here that I have. It's not something that will change on its own via auto mix, automation. So I just mix into it after the first setting is made and just make sure everything coming out of there sounds good to the way that I want to hear it. But then that's coming back in channels 15 and 16. And channels 15 and 16, once again, I have full global EQ control over the whole sound system as well as dynamics processing. So in each step of the way, I can make adjustments where this changes the sound this much here, but then I can come into another position and I can change what it did in a much more controlled or detailed way with the small adjustments like small EQ, or I can make even a broader adjustment with a wider band. So like I can do that for the whole system. Then when I get to the Aphex, it adds its color to it. And then once it gets back into the AW, I can adjust how its color is actually affecting the whole mix with my own EQ adjustments. And then that runs into the master channel, which we then have full global EQ control again with full dynamics processing control again. Okay, so that's where you'd probably end up setting your limiter up or whatnot. And in some cases on this album, I do set things up as a limiter on the final master channel. But there's other songs where I just forego dynamics processing altogether, and I use it to utilize digital clipping, where it'd be a soft clipper in the DAW world. But I utilize digital clipping in that respect so I can get the volume up even louder to have bigger energy, bigger pump, bigger pop, and still have the power in the transients, that, like in the drums and stuff, that would normally be squashed, killed if I were to be using a limiter in that kind of setting. Also, one last trick I'll tell you about. I've already got input channels 1 through 16 utilized in this. But if I switch over to input channels 17 through 24, I'm also going to route my mixes at any one of those stages, whether it's through the multiband compressor or the mid-side processor or coming out of the Aphex back into the machine. That's going to be routed in from time to time into input channels 17 and 18. And that's going to be utilized as my, New York compression, parallel compression, where I'm going to squash the hell out of the signal and then bring that in underneath the actual mix, the actual signal that I want to help thicken and fatten things up even just that much more. And I'll show you that a little bit later on down the line when I get to the songs that are utilizing that technique. All right. Now, there's just one or two things left to do to set the AW up for mastering mode. One, we want to turn the peak hold on. We want that on. We want to see what our peaks are at all times, what they're being held at, what the highest peaks are. And we also want to set it up so that our meters are showing the fine level control position. Because right now we run from -20 to -12, -6, -2, and then 0. So we're going to adjust that here. And let's see, digital sync, blah, 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 direct. There it is. FL meter fluorescent or whatever, meter fine. It's on normal. Make it fine. Now our controls look like this. So we can see much more detail when it comes to the levels of everything. It's set that way here. So at this point, what we do is basically you go through and you listen and you analyze each song. You listen to what's going on and you look at what's happening up here in the in your audio channels with how you have everything set up for your multiband and your mid-side, so forth. So if we were to play the song, we get this.
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. A ganglion of neurons and fatty tissues is all he be. Possible oxygen starvation caused this now monstrosity. Possibly. What else could it be? Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazed psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
Okay, now listening to that, it depends on the sources that you're listening to, but you might be able to hear that there's too much bass in that low floor tom on the right side. So how would you fix that? Well, you come in here to your mid-side processors and you choose the right channel, which is right there. And what we would do is we're going to come in here, we're going to give it a pretty tight cue, and we're going to cut that fucker.
Of a madman, there is nothing much to see. A ganglion of neurons and fatty tissues is all he be. Possible oxygen starvation caused this now monstrosity.
Now, you might have heard it, you might have not. There really wasn't any change to the low frequency when I turned the EQ on and off on this mid-side processor just for the right channel, because there's nothing really playing in this frequency range that's been cut on the right channel.
Possibly.
Now let's set these up as an A/B point.
Could it be? Inside the mind.
All right.
What else could it be? Inside the...
Too much bass.
What else could it be? Inside the...
That has definitely been tamed a bit, but it's still not there where I want it to be. I think if I remember right, let's go ahead and turn the auto mix back on. Let's go ahead and look back at that EQ setting on that channel.
What else?
My Q at the point was actually 2.5, the same frequency level, center frequency range at 111 hertz and cut negative 13 dB.
Could it be inside the...
Okay, so at this point, I want to show you what the Aphex is doing for this part of the song, okay? We're going to go ahead and start it back up. Just let those parts play, and I'm going to turn the Aphex on at some point and back off, and I'm going to do that several times just so you can hear it. I wanted something that was not going to be over the top noticeable. I wanted to use the Aphex to give it a little more high-end clarity because the way the Aphex does it is going to be different than how the AW can do it or how other EQs do it. And it's not necessarily that it sounds better, it's just different, you know? That's all it is. It's just, I have it, I want to use it, it's going to be a little different sound. Let it happen. I also wanted to add just a hair of the little bit of the bottom end frequencies that the Aphex can help bring out, just to give it more real punch in the real deep low end, say like 20 hertz to 40 hertz, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the Aphex does that, adding its own bit of color and whatnot, as opposed to what I would get from the AW EQ. The AW EQ is still capable of accentuating those frequencies quite well, but it just won't sound quite the same as what the Aphex does. And it's not necessarily, like I said, that the Aphex is better, it's just different. That's all it is. So let me turn things on and off here for you just so you can get an idea what it sounds like.
What else could it be inside the... What else could it be inside the mind of a madman? There is nothing much to see.
That's with the Aphex.
Psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
And that's without the Aphex. With the Aphex. Without the Aphex. Looks like I had a chord or something that was a little funky there. All of a sudden I got more volume coming through. Ha! That's okay. Let's show that again. This is without the Aphex.
What else could it be inside the mind of a madman? There is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazy
With the Aphex.
killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
Without the Aphex. So in comparison, I'm going to add a global EQ just on the master channel. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to turn the Aphex back on. Go ahead and back it up. The Aphex is still on.
What else could it be inside the mind of a madman? There is nothing
Turn it off.
much to see. Maybe this crazy
Turn on the EQ.
killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia
Turn off the EQ.
is all he really
Turn on the Aphex.
needs to do his deed.
sounds like with my EQ, I still need to bring up the high mids a little more. So this is the Aphex. And there's just the global EQ. Maybe I need to boost the lows a little bit. Turn off the EQ. Turn on the Aphex. Anyway, point is the AW is more than capable of creating a good EQ setup and a good sound to get those accentuated tones out if you wanted to use it that way. But the Aphex itself, it's just a different color. It's just slightly different. It's not better, it's just a little bit different. That's all it is. Just a matter of preference, I guess. And for me, like I said, I got one. I want to use it, so that's all it is. You guys don't have to use that kind of gear to do get a great sounding master off of your music with the AW4416. You could do it strictly in the box 100% at any point. At this point, you're really just going to be analyzing each song. So you analyze it, you figure out what the problem is. Like I said, I had too much bass in my low floor tom, and that was set up through all the songs. So each song has got that same level of bass cut out just on the right hand channel. And then we go through and we have different things happening, like boosting up EQs here and there and whatnot. And I'll show you that stuff here in just a little bit. All right. Right now, I'm going to get things set back up. We're going to jump over to the auto mix that I've already made for this mastering setup, starting with this first song. Okay, so we're just going to show you what's been done with certain parts of this track. This is still the first song, Inside the Mind of the Madman. Now, this is the mix channel, channels 3 and 4 on the monitor channels for the actual mixes. Now you can see here I've added a mild compressor. It's 10 dB or negative 10 dB threshold with only a 2-to-1 ratio, attack of 19 milliseconds, and a release of 46. Those numbers were just arbitrarily chosen based strictly on sound. I just liked how it sounded a little bit, and all I was really doing was looking to control the peaks. And I'll show you that it's really not interacting much with how things are with the signal.
What else could it be? Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazy psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
All we're doing there, or all that I am doing there, is I'm just controlling transient peaks so that they don't spike as high as they normally would have without really affecting the overall sound of the song. Now, in this particular case, when we get back to our multi-band compression, I don't really have much going on. I mean, check it out. Everything is turned off. Everything. Why? Because when it comes down to it, I don't really need those things. Not on this particular track, so I'm going to leave them alone. As I said, don't use anything you don't have to use. Only use the tools that are necessary to use. And at this time frame, the multi-band compressor is not necessary to use. My plug into the back there. It's a little sticky, needs to be cleaned up, hadn't been used much. Now, as you can see, everything's pretty nice right through here. Nice and even. The peaks are all pretty steady. When you were watching it, you could see that the audio stayed pretty much within its specified ranges. You know, nothing kept jumping out back and forth really big. It was all really smooth. Now, there's another thing going on here. I'm coming into a section of the song where I have like a big chorus line. And I thought, you know what? I want to make them louder, just to give it a little more width and power to the stereo field. But when this song is actually played back in surround like it was intended to be, it gives a bigger surround effect. And here's the part I'm talking about. And then you can see that I brought it back down into unison with the center channels back down to negative 5.7 dB. And you don't change things much when it comes to our mid-side processing section. You don't change the audio much from left to right to center. Otherwise, it's going to throw off your stereo image. And that's not what we want to do. We just want to give it a little bit of oomph here and there. We want to make EQ adjustments as necessary. That's all. And then when you look at the dynamic setting for the master channel here, this is what I got. It's set up as a limiter. It's cut down to 5 dB. It's got a pretty quick attack of 8 milliseconds, so it lets a little bit of the transients through with a release of 23 milliseconds and a relatively fine knee. You know, it's not really cutting too much of that sharp edge off, just a little bit. And we'll go ahead and back it up to where we started in here just to showcase this a little bit.
What else could it be? Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazy psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.
Let me show you what it's like just by turning it off and then turning it back on. Then you can see on the master channel, the EQ is set up with just a high pass filter, shaving off everything around 21 hertz and down. That will help eliminate a lot of the low end noise that I seem to notice that the DA converters pick up, or maybe I should say it's the AD converters, because whenever I go to look at a spectrum of a WAV file on the computer and play back, there's a lot of noise that you don't even hear, but I can see it registering on the graphic for the frequency spectrum. And setting up this low band frequency here like this, you don't really lose a lot of any noticeable tone to the music. but you can cut out those really low frequencies that are kind of loud showing up on your graphic, your frequency spectrum graph, which still in turn plays hell with the headroom on your master bus. You know, if you want to be able to have your mixes cleaner and louder, your masters mixed, or your masters cleaner and louder, you want to get rid of that low end. You may not be able to hear it, but the voltage is still going through your master bus, so it's still being there, adding to everything that's there. Okay, so this is another thing I wanted to show, just to hear. This is this point where I'm utilizing a little bit of the 4-band multi-band compressor. Let's see if I've actually got things set up here. So I have some compression going on the low band. Not a whole lot, and nothing there on the low mids, nothing on the high mids, nothing on the upper mids, or the high highs, the high frequencies. It's all right here. And why is that? It's just because of how the song was recorded and mixed, and how it's structured. It's kind of a heavier song for being something that's supposed to represent the early to mid 70s. And it uses some double kick, and the way I mix the kick drum is usually, I got a lot of boom, some good resonance in there, and when you end up going to double kick, it can end up pulsating too much. So here's what things are sounding like in the mix as it was mastered. You notice the compressor is on pretty much all the time. It's keeping the peaks level, so they're not playing hell down the line with any other dynamics processors or the effects. Let's go and back it back up again. And I'll turn it on and off just to let you hear what's going on.
He pulls the wings off a little flies and he catapults bunnies into the sky. He'll burn small ants with great desire, but he doesn't use glass, he uses real fire.
It's really subtle, but it actually makes a difference. Okay? Now, there's another thing I'm going to do. Coming up here, I actually go into a double kick, and I turn just that band down.
Just for fun, you'll get a whim. Hey, Tweety Bird, you want to go for a swim?
Again, that's not much of a change. Let's switch back over to the home mode and look at the inputs.
Just for fun, you'll get a whim. Hey, Tweety Bird, you want to go for a swim?
Now, how much did that actually change? Not a whole lot. See, my inputs right now are for the multi-band are kind of on the high side. I got them pushed up to 3.2 dB, and I turn it down to 2.1 dB, and then bring it back in. Now, what's going on with everything on the mid-side processors? Not using any compression on the left channel, or the right channel, or the center channel on this song. How about EQ? On the center, I've got some dips right there. And then on the left, or right, there's my cut for that tom. And I got a little bit of boost a little bit of cut just on the left side. And that's kind of the lower resonant frequencies of the toms that are coming out the left channel. Okay? These cuts here just represents a little bit of boxiness and a little bit of harsh mid-range that are coming through from, say, like not the snare itself, but the lead guitar, the cymbals, things like that that are coming through the center channel. And so that's how they play out. I'm not doing anything with dynamics, or am I? I do have some compression on the channel that the Aphex is coming back into, but no EQ. I've got just a little bit here, a 3 dB threshold with a 2-to-1 ratio, and then I'm boosting it up 3.5 dB. It's got a relatively slow attack and release time. Does it even get touched? Man, I don't know. How can we find out? We'd have to play through the whole song. It's been a while. I can't remember how this is set up here. Man, look at that. I think it's just barely tickling the compressor there. But that's the whole point. You're not doing a whole bunch with this equipment. You're just doing, I guess what you'd say is just enough. You're just controlling the peaks here. And right now, I'm just controlling the peaks from blowing over the 0 dB spot, with maybe allowing just a little bit of the transient to come through. That's about it. Okay, here's another example. I am now currently going to be playing parts of the song Escape from Hell. And this track, for some reason, had a couple of spikes, and I mean really good spikes, in the audio, in the transients, that when the compressors hit them the way that everything was set up before, it just really crushed the sound. It's like, wow, that's way too harsh. So it had to be tamed, but it couldn't be tamed just on one thing alone. It had to be dealt with through multiple stages of compression. So I'll try to show you what's going on here. We'll start by looking at what's going on in the mixed, the mixed tracks here and on the monitor view channels and the display here. All right, let's go ahead and get it started here. why is that spike there? Why? I never really figured it out because listening to it, I didn't hear any kind of problem when there was no compression put on. Let me get this thing set up and I'll turn off all the compressors and we'll just listen to it without an auto mix and see what the difference it makes is. All right, why did I get that bump? That here you can see it's above -6, and when you go to the fine meter, see if I can get that to focus in better. It's up there at -2, maybe a little bit higher than -2 dB. That bump is going to screw with things. Let me see if I can get this set up to where you guys might actually be able to hear it. I just heard it right there. There was like a loud crack just on the one upper tom that would come out of the left speaker, okay? Didn't like that. So the solution was we changed up how things were working there. But then we also had to change our dynamics on our multiband. In fact, let's go ahead and go through this. Let's go back to 5. So you didn't like that one. We got them turned on here, turned off, 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 off. That was for the second track and going forward. But now, here we go. To make it work out, this is the change. This is our low band, low mid. The upper mid, we left alone. We didn't need it there. But we also put it in. That's a pretty good squash just on the high frequencies. And the high frequency band, again, ranges from 2.67 kilohertz to a full 20 kilohertz. Again, this is all just for control, to keep the peaks tamed so they don't create a problem farther down the line. Okay, so now I want to switch gears over to where we get into the second part of the album. This would be, if we're talking CDs, this would be CD number 2, right? This is where things change up a bit. This is where the music gets more intense, heavier, darker, so to speak. You know, before it was, the music itself was kind of upbeat and kind of rocking, more of a classic pop rock kind of thing, as well as some vaudeville stuff in there, and with more melodic, like solos and things like that. Now we're getting into more of the old school heavy metal from like the Sabbath sound, the Judas Priest sound, or things like that, right? And it's because the tone was being dictated by the story and how the story went. So as it got darker, these songs built up the way they did, not the way it was recorded, but the type of sound, say like for the guitars, effects and stuff, all got changed. They got changed to different kind of effects, which in turn means that the mix had to be different. So things got mixed differently, and when they got mastered differently to add in more energy, more power. And I want to show you just really quick how that's set up here. This is starting with the song Children of the Night, I believe. Let's go ahead and just play this really quick before I bring you over here to take a look at what's going on in the AW.
Applies to each and every one of us. It is a tale of who we are, how we came to be, and where our journey is supposed to take us. A tale of our sacrifices and our passage to divinity. We were once society's unwanted, the unwashed, the outcasts of humanity. Not fit to show our faces in public, we were cast in the shadow. Who are we? We are the children of the night, that's what we be. The lepers of our modern society. There is a scar on our eyes. Who can solve the road?
So now we get into these songs, these harder, heavier songs, and things change up a bit. We'll go ahead and show you the settings I have here. We're not really utilizing compression on the mix channels. See, it's turned off. Nothing's really been done there. But I do have a little bit of EQ on it. You can see I've taken out half a dB at 125 hertz on the low shelving. And I've also taken out 2 dB at 2.82 kilohertz on the high shelving. Then when we get into our multi-band compressors, check it out. My crossovers have changed. Instead of being 315 hertz here, it's 265 hertz. Why? Because it helped take out even more the boxiness that I was hearing during the mastering stage within these songs, this type of setup. I liked how they sounded when I mixed them on the monitors out in the other room, but when I brought them in here for mastering with the big subs and everything, it was like too much of the low mids there I don't quite like. Now, that also means on my low mid band on the multi-band compressor, I also changed my crossover here. I'm down to 125 hertz instead of at 177. It looks like I've left everything else alone. Yes, I did. So that's perfectly fine. Fine and dandy. All right. So, what about compression? I have added compression here. Negative 23 dB ratio, or not a threshold, I should say, but the ratio is only 1.7 to 1, so I'm not compressing it really hard. A little bit of an attack to keep the transients coming through without being touched too much, and a slower release. These are the attack and the release settings on these are based solely off of what sounds good for the song and how it's performed and how it was recorded and how it's mixed. You're not really going by the numbers here. All these numbers indicate are a reference for if you have to come back, this is where you were. You're strictly setting these things because this is where it sounded best in your ears. And then a 2 on the knee is just to tame that transition a little bit more than a setting of a 1. So anyway, let's go back through and play the song and just listen to it all again. While it's happening, I'll show you the different settings here as it's going through. We'll start back with the monitor channels on the mix. We have no dynamics, just the EQ the way it is. So here's what happens if I turn the, if I change the EQ's filter system here, so the low pass is at a higher frequency.
What is said here tonight significantly applies to each and every one of us.
Not a huge difference, but it was enough that I preferred that it down to 265 hertz. It sounded better.
It is a tale of who we are, how we came to be, and where our journey is supposed to take us. A tale of our sacrifices and our passage to divinity. Of humanity, not fit to show our faces in public. We were cast in the shadow. Who are we? We are the children of the night. That's what we be.
Now, as you saw there, I have compression on the multiband working on the first 3 bands, but nothing on the high frequencies. I didn't feel it needed it. However, take a look at the volume settings. Low band is the same, low mids was the same, but I pushed up the volume output, or no, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. I pulled down the volume output of the high mids and the high frequencies, the high frequency bands. And that's simply because I was getting rid of frequency ranges that really, how should I put it? They can hurt your ears. You know what I mean? I wanted to make things tamer, more mellow. And then when it comes to the mid-side processors, they've been turned up a little bit, but not much. That's just because I wanted this track to have more energy, so I got more volume pumping through the whole system from one end to the other. Same with where it comes back in from the AFX exciter, same where it goes back to the channel that brings the AFX back in. Oh, here's something to look at. Right here. I've got these, this is my mid-side, right? The center channels are louder by 1.7 dB than the side channels. Why? Because in surround mode, everything sounded way too loud and washed out. You know what I mean? But when I pulled down the side channels, it allowed the center channels to stand out more. The vocals sounded better, and even the snare sounded even more punchy and more powerful. But it didn't really kill the stereo effect, you know, being as wide as it did. It didn't narrow it down. Why? Partly to do with this. Channel 17 through 24, well, on channel 17 and 18, this is my parallel compression right here. And I am running no EQ, but I have a hard limiter compression with a heavy release. Why is the release so slow, 180 milliseconds? So it maintains an even level coming throughout. Hopefully that's the idea anyway. Your volume level stays even through the whole thing and you're not getting any additional pumping. Then only a 5.5 dB boost, which probably wasn't necessary because I've only boosted the volume up that much. I'll play the song and I'll mess with the volume just so you can hear how that's changing things, right? Go back to the beginning and let's check it out. It's subtle, but it's supposed to be subtle. But when you bring it into how it's supposed to be, it just adds extra fullness, extra thickness, extra power, extra loudness. It's just makes this thing sound more energetic and just, in that case, heavier, more powerful, more upfront. You know, whatever kind of terminology, whatever kind of spin you want to put on it.
One of us. Supposed to take us, a tale of our sacrifices and our passage to divinity.
Now, what else is going on here? Let's go back to our main channels, which have our multiband compression and mid-side. On the mid-side channels, I have no compression happening, none whatsoever. Let's see if we can get that to focus in again. There we go. Everything's turned off. But let's check out EQ. No EQ there on the left. I have that cut on the right, but it's a tighter Q now, and it's a different frequency. It's lower. It's nearly half of what the last one was. And then center channels. Oh, take a look. I have a cut by a relatively tight Q, 1 dB cut at 50 hertz. But a 2.5 Q, which is still kind of tight at 167 hertz. I'm boosting 3.5 dB. The 4K is being cut down -1 dB with a 2.8 Q. And this is because of the effect. I'm getting rid of some of the overly driven thud of that kick drum and whatnot. But then at 167 hertz, that's where that snare's resonance is coming in, where it gives you that body, that power going boom. And it sounds like it's hitting really hard. And then the 4K with 2.8 Q, the 1 dB cut is to make it so that the lead guitar, the soloed guitars, and some of the vocals and cymbals coming through in that range aren't hurting your ears.
Of humanity, not fit to show our faces in public. We were cast in the shadow. Who are we? We are the children of the night. That's what we be.
And now on the channel that's coming back from the Aphex, I'm cutting another 2 dB on a shelf at 125 hertz. I've cut another 2 dB at the 4K with a really tight Q, 1.8, and that's it. Until we get over into the master. Okay, no EQ on the master, but check out the dynamics page. No dynamics at all, but I'm pushed the volume up 7.5 dB. Why? I'm utilizing the digital clipping, like soft clipping, so that this track stands out louder than the other tracks without sounding squashed. There's something else I wanted to point out here, and we're going to look at the auto mix section under the offline events list, and this is the scene and library settings. Now you can see this starts out this whole project at scene 5. But check out channel 13. It's getting EQ library changes like crazy. Let's see, at 5:16:300, it goes to library number 42 and then back to 41 within just 2/100ths of a second. And this is on channel 13, which is our mid-size processor right here for the mono channels. This is the ones that come out the center. And since it's only being done on channel 13 and these are linked, channel 14 should also pick it up as well. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's jump to section 5 minutes, 16 seconds. So come down here to number locate, and then we can just type in 0, 5, and then 16. Where is it? 1, 6, and then go 0, 0, 0. There we go. So it looks like this. 5:16:0, right? Then we just hit enter, right here. Boom, enter. We are now at 5:16, all right? That places us at this spot in this track. Let's go ahead and start it up and see where we're at here. Okay, so that was actually, it's in the first song again. So let's check it out. What is going on in channel 13 and 14 here in the EQ?
Through these observations you may
Oh, did you see that? Let's check that again. Let's check it again.
look for anyway. And through these observations you may look.
You know what that did? That was getting rid of a harsh, like a sh sound. The S's sound okay, but the sh was picking up way too much. Let me see if I can, we'll turn off the auto mix. We'll go back to that point and we'll just take a listen.
Look for anyway. And through these observations you may look for some relation to.
Yeah, that sh sound comes out much louder than the S sounds do, right? Turn the auto mix back on. Check it out again with the auto mix working.
You wouldn't know what to look for anyway. And through these observations you may look for some relation to some.
Much better. It's much more tamed. And that's happening on both channels 13 and 14 because they're stereo linked, even though in the events list, it's only showing up being programmed for channel 13, which is fine. And just go ahead and go through, let's cycle through this list here and just see everything that's happening. There's quite a few of them on the first song. And then we get to channel library, channel library number 5 on monitor channels. Okay, so this is changing volume levels for the audio, not the audio, but the narration dialogue scenes. Going back to the scene settings, blah, blah, blah. More scenes here. And dialogue stuff again. And then, oh, we added an effect, 45 minutes and 20 something. That's probably the stuff coming up to the track Children of the Night. There's supposed to be a large congregation inside of a big empty warehouse. And I just didn't like how it sounded from the mix. It just didn't sound big enough. So I added some more reverb to it. And I just gain rode it. I just rode the fader on it. So when the crowd was cheering or whatever, just turned up the volume to the reverb. When it was come back to the narration point where the character was supposed to be talking to everybody, pulled that reverb down so it became more clear, more understandable. And we're back into the EQ library here. We are going from, this is on monitor 2, so not really sure what's happening there. That's audio. Yeah, that's dialogue stuff again. Then we go back to channel 13. Okay, so that's the mid-size again. At a minute or an hour, 8 minutes, 44 seconds, and 125 thousandths to 1 hour, 8 minutes, 44 seconds, 275 thousandths. So that's only 150 thousandths of a second difference there. Let's go check it out, see what it is. So it's an hour, 8:44. So again, we're going to go to number locate, and we're going to type in 10844,000, and that brings us to up an hour, 8:44. Enter. Come back to the menu. What are we playing here? Okay, so we're still in Children of the Night, and it's at 125 thousandths to 275 thousandths. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and roll back. That should be good. It's in channel 1314, so we're going to check the EQ library here again. Okay, it's probably going to do the same thing. Let's find out. Yep, that's exactly what it did. It's the sh sound again. It got rid of how harsh it sounded through how everything was set up in the mix at this point, or the mastering, I should say, at this point, because of the mix. And it works. It works really well. It doesn't give us any kind of pop or any kind of distortion. No, nothing. Nothing's going wrong. Let's see what else is up here. Hour 12:17. Well, that still sounds like it's going to be within Children of the Night. I might be wrong. Okay. Yeah, it's still Children of the Night. I think there's still some other things going on here too. Let's, with the leads. I must be wrong. Let's go back into the events list and check things out. Still, everything looks like it's mostly on channel 13, which would make sense. But now we got some stuff up here around 143 that's on channel 16, which is, of course, after the Aphex. And it's at an hour 43. It's quite a few of them. What is that, an hour 43? Let's check it out. 143. Whoops. Well, it's close enough. Let's go. Zeros in. Okay. Enter. Play it. Ah, yeah. Okay. So this is a reunion. And yes, there were a lot of spots. Same thing where the S sounds, the F sounds, whatever it is, things just were a little too strong and they needed to be dealt with. And that was picked up after the Aphex on channels 15 and 16 here.
Hello, Mother. How you doing? Hello, Father. How have you been? It's been a really long time.
Did you see that? It's where the S sound came in. So it was a matter of, it's not really de-essing, but it is de-essing. It's just not using a compression setting to do it because you're not wanting it to come through on the whole channel. If I wanted to set it up as a de-esser, I would use the multiband compressor and I would use the high-end channel system here, the high frequencies, and just set that up as the compressor. Now let's back it up and take a listen to how things are.
Hello, Father. How have you been? It's been a really long...
You see how much that compressed when it got to that S sound? That compressed really hard, which means it was very loud compared to how the rest of the audio was. But it still was too loud for how things were going through the mastering channels. So, again, back here, even though I got some compression on it, we utilize the automation to duck the frequency down right there to tame the problem.
Have you been? It's been a really long time since...
See, that didn't really happen there, so let's go back to EQ.
Hello, Father. How have you been? It's been a really long time since I last saw you. Well over 20 years, I think it's been.
A lot of work there. A lot of stuff that probably could have been handled better with a different mic choice to start with. Because the mics at this time, I think by this time I finally got the Marshall MXL 990s. And they're great sounding mics, but they do have a bump in the upper mid-range. And being that I was speaking softly and closely, and with probably a lot of gain put into it, when you hit that S sound, it really accentuated. Okay? So, we got some good stuff there going on to show you there, how we're working with that. And let's keep going here. What else we got in here? This is all part of that song, Reunion. Everything is right there. And that looks like that was the biggest issue. It's right in that section. But yeah, we got quite a bit of work here. This is all automated work that was done to tame problems with wind, with sounds being too loud, with plosives if there were any, that still within the mix. Everything right here. All right, everyone, that's about a wrap. That's about what I have to say for when it comes to mastering on the AW4416, especially how this album was mastered on it. And obviously, what we covered was how to set the machine up itself to work as a mastering machine, from getting your audio tracks on there, or actually, we didn't talk about that. Maybe I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But you have your initial mixes there, how to route them and build a multi-band compressor, and then how to route from there and build a stereo mid-side processor, and then going out into another signal processor to add some color if you want to do that, or you don't even have to do that if you don't have one. You can just route directly back into the AW and be done with it. And how to utilize dynamics processing through there and what purposes for, to do some gain stage, or not gain stage writing, but some gain writing to control things as necessary, to program in EQ and fader gain settings and channel settings for like compressors and whatnot to get rid of elements. I don't think I covered there was one spot in here, which if I remember right, somewhere in one of these songs, there was a click that I just couldn't get rid of, so it had to be dealt with via compressors, I think, if I remember right. It might have been a combination of a compression, really squashing it down, and then also some volume leveling, just so you didn't hear the volume, the audio drop out. I don't remember off the top of my head. It'd probably take some time to try to find it, because it was just one small thing out of this near 3-hour project. Right? But then we showed you how to set it up so that you can see more detail in your audio playback on the screen here, so you could really check to see how it's working, fine tune it. and then watching your screen for how the audio is going through not just the initial mix, but how it's running through your multiband, how it's running through your mid-side processors and stuff, to see where the peaks are and just see how it's averaging out while you're playing it. And then the one thing, a couple things maybe we didn't talk about is how to get the audio in there in the first place. Now, in a situation like this where you have a big album, even just a normal album that maybe is half an hour, 45 minutes, 70 minutes long, 80 minutes long, your quickest option to get the music in there is to use AW Minor from Benny Badman. And you can still pick that up relatively cheap these days. He's not really overly expensive, and it's a really hell of a good product. It works fast. This particular project, there was 80 individual tracks left and right, so 40 stereo tracks that all had to be taken out from the initial mixes and then reloaded into a new file to work for the masters. And using the Zulu SCSI card, transferring as wave tracks onto the Zulu SCSI and then coming back, that would take a couple afternoons. That'd take several hours. Even when using the CD to do that kind of thing was a 7 or 8, maybe a 10-hour project, right? Because there's a lot of data here. We're talking a couple gigabytes, you know. Now, when transferring files like backups and stuff with the Zulu SCSI, it'll do a CD's worth of data in about 8 to 10 minutes, okay? So it's about an 8x, 10x kind of transfer. But when you're working with converting to wave and bringing wave back in via just the AW alone and its peripherals, say the CD drive or the Zulu SCSI, that takes much longer time. The conversion process is slower, and the upload and download speed is slower. And that was Yamaha's programming into the system. They did it this way because they felt it was making the system the most stable it could possibly be. But with AW Minor, 2 hours. It only took 2 hours to manually go through all the different tracks, rip them to wave, and then go back through and put them back onto the drive in the master file. All right? And then now that Ben's added batch conversion and batch import, I don't know if he's got batch conversion, but I do know he's got batch import. It takes even less time. So it makes the process worthwhile now when you're working with a full album to disassemble the drive, hook it up to your computer, get everything loaded up, and use AW Minor to do all the transfer work back and forth. It's a big time saver, really big time saver. I'd much rather spend a couple hours or less doing that than spending 7, 8, 9, 10 hours transferring within the internals on this machine alone, or the Zulu SCSI peripherals. Okay, so once all the songs are in there, now you figure out your timing, your spacing. You listen to your first one. When it fades out and ends, you set a marker. You just push a marker in there. That's where you're going to want your next song to come back in. So you've waited that long. This is when it comes in. You load up your next song into the file, so it comes in after the song. You see just how much space is in between your lead-in time for that new song and where you'd really want it to come in at. And you just go under the wave drive or the wave view function on your screen here. You move it over to where you get to the song, where it's actually starting. You put a mark there. Then go into your edit menu, select your tracks, select your time bases, which is going to be between the 2 points, and that's going to be under delete. That'll move your whole song back over so it starts right up where your initial marker point was. And you just do that through the whole thing. And if you didn't do your fade-ins and fade-outs during the mix stage, this is also the time in mastering where to do them. You just do it simply by feel. That's really all it is. It's just by feel. What feels right to you? What builds the most emotional experience when listening to the music here to you? And what you think might translate to the listener that way. But most importantly, it's got to be you, because in the end, everything has to go through your filter. It's how you feel. This is your art, so to speak, you know? And if you're working on this for another client, then of course you present that to them and say, does this sound right to you? And they give you the comments of what they want adjusted or if they like it. You know what I mean? It's pretty straightforward. So yeah, you set your stuff up like that. You go through and listen to it. Then you start working on it, just like I was showing you. You just start going through it. You analyze it. You make your adjustments that are necessary to make. You get it to sound right. You're going through whatever kind of processors to color the sound more that just sounds pleasing to you. And then once you got all that done, go ahead and now start working on the dynamic interplay between each song. You know, this song's going to come out at this level. You like how it sounds. It's got a nice groove to it. It's mellow or got a lot of energy, whatever it is, back and forth. It works great. And then it's like the next song comes in. Do you need to be a little more louder? Do you need it to be a little punchier? Or do you need to bring it down even more? That's what you really work on. And that you can take care of within your master bus, your master channel, and you utilize the gain output on your master limiter, your compressor, whatever you want to set up. You don't have to use it by writing the fader control. Although it's capable of doing that, you can do that. It's just easier to set it up as a scene for each song, and you have your master volume set at where you feel it sounds best. That way, when the auto mix goes through, you're recording everything for the final pass. It's all good to go, right? No messing around with it whatsoever. Anyway, yeah, this is about all I can think of telling you guys. I've been blabbing on about this now for over 2 hours, so we're a third of the way there for the actual length of the album itself. And I'm hoping that, you know, at the very least, you guys see that you can set this thing up and you can master on this thing, the AW4416 I'm referring to, and it will provide you great results. It's not hard. It's not overly complicated. It's just time. You know what I mean? And you're just listening to it. Hopefully you've spent a while, maybe like a week or so, away from your album, your mixes. And when you come into the mastering stage, you're listening with fresh ears, with no influence from previously listening to it. And you're going, ooh, you know, I think I might like to have a little more low end here. I might have like a little less body right here. Or the vocals at this point, we need a little more sparkle. We need to bring the cymbals on the sides up a little more. We want to have a little more presence in the harmony vocals. You know, whatever it is, we need to cut down the guitar a little bit. The mid-range is it's just killing my ears. It hurts. I don't want to listen to that. You know, hopefully all that stuff has made sense to you. And it took a little time for me to really grasp it all. I mean, I watched a number of things. Like I said, I used to watch a lot of YouTube stuff from people who were just full of shit. But then I started clicking on things where it was actually people who are providing videos that work for major labels, and they get in more detail about what's going on, and then getting into videos from the software developers who are making stuff for mastering, and they're showing you how it works, why it works, this and that. All of a sudden, it's starting to make more sense. And so, yes, everything you really need to make a great master can be made and done right here in the box. This 20-plus-year-old machine is still more than capable of producing some of the best-sounding records anybody can ever make. It could still blow away people who don't have all the knowledge and experience of like Pro Tools or Reaper or any of those things, and it's not bogged down by all the extraneous bullshit that comes with DAWs. It is simply a matter that everything that's needed is right here in the box. There's nothing extra, and you could set it up in a numerous amount of ways. You can hook it up to other hardware processors, and everything is almost exactly zero latency. I mean, it's got to have some because it's a DA or an AD to DA conversion process, but it is so fast that we don't even notice it. Otherwise, you couldn't plug into this thing and play your guitar or listen through headphones or whatever, and everything's still in sync with, you know, how you're playing, or the drums or the keyboards. There would be a lag there, and there is not. This is perfectly in sync as far as we can tell on a human level. So it works perfectly. It's flat. Or not flat. It's fast. And one of the great things about this thing is very, very, very rarely does it ever screw up. Occasionally, it still can. Sometimes a bug pops up, sometimes a glitch, but it is extremely rare that something like that happens. So anyway, I think I've said all I have to say on this matter for when it comes to mastering. I'm not sure. I probably won't do any more videos about mastering on the AW4416 because, you know, I've done 4 of them and I don't know anything else to tell you guys. There's people out there who are more knowledgeable than I am on the subject, and they're part of the group, and they can actually provide and offer you guys probably a lot more information about it than I can. And so with that, you guys take it easy. I don't think I'm going to be spending too much more time making any other videos with the AW. I might make one with testing out the SSD drives I have, because I told you guys that I got 2 of them and I finally figured out what I was doing wrong, why they weren't working. Now they're working. And a couple of you guys said, well, we want to see them working with full 16-track recording, and then how they play back, how the jog shuttles work, and all this stuff. So I'm going to have to work on something to get that up. I mean, I could easily just do something where I route the oscillator inside to all 16 channels and record them at 24-bit 48 kilohertz. But that might be kind of boring. You know, nobody's going to really want to hear that. As far as music, I don't have anything that a band or anything, so I don't have anything that would do 16 channels or need 16 channels. The best I could do is probably to utilize the DAW here and run 8 channels out of my my interface into 8 channels on the AW, and then record another 8 channels for my drums playing along with whatever music is there. I might do that, but for now, that's probably going to be a little bit of time in the future, because I'm going to actually tear this unit down and I'm going to send the motherboard, the main board out to have the battery replaced. I've got a different chip than what most other people are talking about. I bought the chip that's going to give me direct access to the battery, so if I ever have to replace it again, all I got to do is pop the bottom of this thing off, get in there, pop the battery out, pop it in, never mess with the chip again, just the batteries, and be done with that. And I also got to get fader number 16 here to work. I mean, it's stuck. You can move it by hand without much issue at all. In fact, there's no issue, but the motor doesn't want to move it very much. It gets stuck real easy. So I may have to just disassemble things, blow it out at first, and then hit it with some fader lube and see if that makes it work. Otherwise, I'll have to just replace it with a new one I've had sitting in the house for over 7 years or something now. Anyway, you guys take it easy. Stay on the forums. Keep asking questions. Keep figuring out ways to keep this machine alive, because I will argue till the day I die, till the end of time, that this is 1,000 times better than a DAW when it comes to music production and the sound. Sure, a DAW gives you a lot of editing features, and it's really fast with the new GUI graphics user systems in it, but there's nothing compared to utilizing something where you have just access to physical controls to everything you want to deal with. All the tracks have their own faders. You got physical EQ knobs to turn, physical pan knobs to turn. Everything is, I guess it's that tactile response or whatever you call it for the touch, something like that. And you can't build a DAW with all this stuff for the same price as what you could buy one of these things for. Even when these things were brand new, you can't do it. So this is a top-notch machine, even 20 plus years later, 23, 24, 25 years later. So yeah, we need to do everything we can to keep these things functioning. Guys, figure out how these things work inside and out. Figure out what can be made to work with them. Just like I was able to figure out Zulu SCSI could work with it. In the CD slot, you can probably still get it to work because they are made to work for CDs. And that card right there, this chip, if nobody else has seen any of my other videos, this little chip here is a 256 gigabyte chip. I currently have, I think, 4 virtual hard drives on that thing. Two or three of them are set up as 62 or 64 gigabyte hard drives that are made for storing backups from this machine. And then I got a few that are smaller drives that are wave drives. So I can just run wave files back and forth really quick if I'm just doing one or two here and there. But works really great when I'm wanting to just work with samples. Like if I bring in samples to the sample pad here, I just have a wave drive full of samples, both set in at 16 and 24-bit, both at 44.1 and 48 kilohertz, and just load them in as I want them. I don't have to mess around with keep going back and forth to the computer or whatever. Got them right there in that little chip, and just load them up, try them out. If I don't like them, try something else. Real quick and easy. So anyway, you guys take it easy. This is Brian F. Studios for the AW4416 crew on Facebook. You guys all have a good night.
Could it be?
Inside the mind of a madman, there is nothing much to see. Maybe this crazed psychotic killer suffers from malformed synapses. A generous blast of paranoia is all he really needs to do his deed. That despicable deed.